Oh yeah, we're back. We got the intro music rolling again. It's just nice. I almost just want to stop and listen to it. Just not have my horrible voice claptrapping all over the top of it. But a couple things on my mind today. Glimmer versus a trigger. Thanks Instagram, thanks Mom. And then wanted to chat a little bit about epithets, not epitaphs, two very different things, and how those might help guide your life. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Kind of had a funny story I wanted to share related to the trigger thing, but we were out we drive everywhere with the dogs, and I feel like we take pretty good care of them and are careful about that stuff. Probably lots of opinions out there about it, but I don't think they're not staying in any hot cars or super cold cars, regardless. Anyway, we were driving somewhere and we parked and got out of the truck. And the dogs were in the truck, and it was evening. It was cool, not hot at all. They have a nice little breeze going through the truck, and got out, locked the truck, walk away, and I see this couple and young lady kind of rubbernecks and looks at the truck, says something back to her partner, husband, boyfriend, whatever, maybe friend. I don't think it was her brother. Anyway, and she looks back at the truck and then stops and then walks back and takes a picture of our license plate. I thought that was a little weird. And so the lure was in the water, so I bit. Absolutely latched onto that hook. And as she walked away, I said, excuse me, is something the matter or something wrong? And she kind of said something back to us and kept walking. I said, said the classic, hey, is there a problem here? And that was a great invitation for her to stop and turn around and tell us about animal cruelty, and that she was just watching out for the animals, giving a voice to them, and kind of lecturing us on what we should or shouldn't do with our dogs. I don't want to say lecturing. That's not fair to her. She was informing us of her strong opinion about what we should do or not do with dogs. Anyway, I think overall it was a pretty civilized exchange. But at one point, it was kind of starting to escalate slightly, and she stops and she says, and this totally disarmed me in the whole event. And she stops and she says, I don't like confrontation. I don't want to be confrontational because last time I got pepper sprayed once during a confrontation. I took everything in me not to laugh at her and say, hey, if you don't like confrontation in the past when you've been confrontational and been pepper sprayed, don't you see a common denominator here? Anyway, I didn't say that. I should have. It would have been witty and funny. Probably would have took the situation to a whole nother level. Anyway, got resolved. I thought it was a little odd. That just made me laugh so much. And that ties into today a little bit. And here's the deal. Fundamentally, I think there is some officious intermeddling there. It's not quite the correct use of that term, but that's really what it felt like. It's like vulture do-goodership, but in my mind, fundamentally, I get where she's coming from. If you see something like that, there's definitely lots of animal abuse that goes on in the world, whatever. But that made me think about triggers versus glimmers, and then I saw just triggers in general, because it was essentially an innocuous situation which I could have decided to escalate and been a real shithead about, but it resolved fine. And then I saw on my mom's Instagram today, it basically said the glimmer is the opposite of a trigger. So trigger is something that sets you off, makes you agitated, creates a lot of friction. And what I think is so funny when I hear people use that term trigger, it's I'm so triggered. And they say it as if there's no coming down from it. It's now a state. And I guess fundamentally for those that do get into a emotional, physiological state where, things are escalated, elevated, it's probably challenging to bring it back down. But in some ways, if you're walking around choosing to be triggered, the external world is just you're getting peppered with information from the world and you're letting it trigger you. I hear the way that word is used. It makes, I think in some ways, it could make you sound so helpless. Somebody who has OCD and their OCD gets triggered, I don't necessarily think that's like them easily making, I don't know, but I don't think that's them like easily being able to have some sort of choice of like, well, I don't want my OCD to bother me today. I don't think that's how it works in my mind. But I do think there's a lot of things out there where you're just like, I'm just so triggered by this thing. Even just saying that phrase makes me just feel like I wouldn't want to say that out loud to people if I did feel that way. But in saying it, I kind of feel like when you say it, it's like, oh, this is a permanent state. Like, not only am I triggered, but I don't know how the hell to get out of it. And the glimmer thing I thought was really interesting on Instagram, because it was, presented as the opposite of a trigger. And I thought that was such a cool idea, because moments in your day that make you feel joy, happiness, peace, or gratitude. And you got to train your brain to look out for the glimmers, tiny moments, and they'll appear more and more as opposed to the triggers, right? Because you can find those everywhere too, especially if you're looking for them. But I've never thought of that. I've never thought of what's the opposite of that. People just say things like, be more positive. But I really like that idea of just looking for the tiny moments of joy, the small things that just make you really happy. And I look at a lot of the things I do to go out of my way to do throughout the day. I feel like I'm, gravitating toward those things. Got a nice little ritual, usually Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays, coach class, workout, go for a walk with the dogs, with friends, talking, chatting about the day, sun's coming up. And it's kind of a corny term, but man, it's like that whole morning's just packed with those glimmers. And they just, I feel like they'll if you can keep doing that. One of the things I liked about this is there a potential if you feel like those could overwhelm the triggers? Because like I said, I think to some extent, if you're walking around feeling triggered all the time, barring some other sort of underlying challenge, order, mechanical dysfunction, it's easy to just kind of make those triggers up and get stuck on them. So find the glimmers. Oh, that was cool. Needs a cooler name. Instead of glimmer, needs to be something like more aggressive, like find the kick-asses. I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was really nice. I'm gonna keep trying to think about that. And then the other thing I was thinking about lately was not epitaphs, epithets. And an epithet is an adjective or descriptive phrase expressing quality or characteristic of the person or thing mentioned. And so, somebody was actually talking about him the other day. They saw him at concert. Billy Joel, the Piano Man. Prince of Pop, Michael Jackson. A lot of music ones. Or I was looking up for some of them on the Google, the Sultan of Swat, Babe Ruth. So, the GOAT, Michael Jordan. There you go. And the other reason I was thinking about this is there's a buddy of mine, Connor Warman, and he puts out this daily email, and I think he's got like he's been doing it for a while, but he writes pretty periodically, if not daily, on I think he calls it Literary Alchemists. And if you get a chance, Connor Warman, Literary Alchemist, check it out. Really prolific in his writing and reading, and he's gone through reading like a lot of the classical novels, and that got me thinking about two of my favorite books, and also because there's a movie, I guess, or a remake coming out of it, but the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the characters in there have these epithets, like swift-footed Achilles, gray-eyed Athena, that kind of stuff. And some of them have like more pomp and circumstance than others. Some are just mainly to describe. But anyway, what I was thinking about with this epithet, the phrase expressing quality, characteristic of a person or thing mentioned, what would your epithet be if if you asked around, if people had to describe you this way? That's kind of an uncomfortable thing to think about. I didn't like it as I delved into thinking about this one, and it made me it made me really think a lot about my behavior and the face I put out to the world, and the one I want to put out to the world. Maybe the one I share with people closest to me and don't share with everybody else. It also made me think about like, what is, I think it's a good question. It's like, what is the epithet that you would want? And how do you go live that? Right. And this I thought was really motivating. I'll think about this one more. I didn't get something specific down to paper. James the Epic or something. That also reminded me, the other thing that made me think about the epithet was the How to Train Your Dragon movie. I think the kid's dad is called Stoic the Vast. It's like such a ridiculous one. But it's spot on with what I'm talking about is, think about if you had to ask your 10 closest friends or maybe 50 people like different groups, people you work with, what would be your epithet? What would they say? And then the second one is what is the epithet you want? Or maybe even how you would describe yourself. And are you living up to that? Is that the one you want to live up to? I just thought it was really nice because I think it boils down like a lot of complicated feelings we may or may not, and it can oversimplify it, but may or may not have about ourselves, and boils them down to some, like 3-4 word descriptor. And if that's something we want, are we moving toward that thing? I thought that was really interesting. Because I think one for me is I definitely want to be more reliable for my friends. And yeah, that was one I thought of. So I'm pausing because it's an uncomfortable thing for me to talk about, but hey, that's okay. That's the point of it. And maybe something about like being active or activity, but I think I do that one pretty well. So happy how I'm living up to that one. Anyway, there we go. Glimmers, not triggers. Epithets. What's yours? You living up to it? More tomorrow.